Good morning. So, welcome again to a new topic. So, today we are going to be talking about don't judge a book by its cover. And the reason I picked this is because this morning I was talking to my sisters about tattoos, because we all have some and we are thinking about possibly getting another one and just making it a time that we can all visit with each other. However, something that always comes up whenever we start talking about it is people's opinion of us. So, if we kind of go back, we all raised in the same household. We had very strict parents. We were all academics, so we were always getting good grades. We always tried to dress modestly. Not all the time. We all had our own rebellious phases where we dressed all sorts of weird ways. But we all kind of had a good reputation for the longest time. And then a few years ago, once we all kind of went to college, we all started to kind of learn more about ourselves. We all explored being a little bit more creative with our appearances, and it was all received in varying degrees of different ways between positive and negative. And so personally, I went through a hair phase. So I was cutting my hair all sorts of weird ways. I was dyeing my hair a whole bunch of different colors. I was doing my makeup really out there and outrageous sometimes, just to kind of have fun with it, because it's my hair, it's my face. And one of the biggest things was I wanted to do it while I was in college, because the jobs that I had were waitressing jobs and temp jobs and just jobs that I was doing to have gas money and lunch money while I was in college. So it didn't really matter what I looked like. If anything, I used to get compliments on, oh, your hair looks great, or oh, your makeup looks really cool today. And once I graduated college and I started to go into the real workforce, I had to go back to my brown hair. I tried to do really simple, really modest makeup looks, so like just the black eyeliner or more nude eyeshadows and something that was a little less ostentatious. Because there is this misconception that if you look neat and clean cut, you'll get the job, you're probably a harder worker, you're not some sort of troublemaker, and you are going to be better for them. That's not always true. So, while I was going through my little rebellious phase, at some point I remember I had just gotten this piercing. So they're two little hoops, but they were connected as an industrial bar. I thought it was a really cool piercing. I thought about it for years, and I finally said, you know what? Let's go get it done. Granted, the sound of cartilage popping is probably really, set me off, and my sister had to drive me home because I was freaking out a little bit. I was like, that was gross. I might pass out. But I mean, it didn't really hurt too much for me. It ended up being really cool. The healing process was a pain, and while it was healing, I was like, you know what? I kept getting my hair tangled in the little ends of it, because an industrial sticks out on both ends and your hair can get wrapped around it. So it was really annoying. I was brushing my hair and it would pull at it and tug at it, and when you have a new piercing that's healing, every tug feels like you're just setting your ear on fire, and it hurts like crazy. So I was doing everything I could not to tug on it, not to touch it, not to sleep on it, but all of my hair kept getting tangled in it. So I finally decided, well, my hair grows really quickly, and I'm in college. I wasn't doing any big plays at the time, so all of my work was backstage. I could look however I wanted to look. So I went to the person who usually cut my hair, and I said, I want a mohawk. And she looked at me like I was crazy, because I had my hair probably past my shoulders already by this point. And she was like, you want a what now? So I had her shave off both sides of my head. It was kind of short in the back, and then it kind of got longer in the front, so I can kind of toss it to whatever side. I loved it. It was probably the best haircut I've ever had. Partly because I could just wake up in the morning, brush my hand through it, and I was ready to go. If I wanted to blow dry the back so it would stand up a little more and tousle it so it had a little more volume, I could, but it really didn't take that much time. Compared to now, which I'm always tying it up in a ponytail because it's hot and I'm lazy. So that haircut was just a lot of fun. And so I had this new piercing, I had this like mohawk haircut, and I was still doing my crazy stuff. So I had like some really nice eyeliner on that was like, you know, they always say the wing that would cut you. And I was really into red lipstick, so I felt like a punk. I felt so cool. And I remember being super confident because I looked really cool and it was a lot of fun. But then I started to notice how people reacted to me. So a lot of people who already knew me were wondering if I'd gotten into something bad. I remember we went to a family friend's barbecue and some of their kids were like, "Hey mom, you know that like haircut, you know, the way she looks kind of looks like those people who are getting into trouble and the people who are getting into drugs and like all of the bad stuff." And she was like, "But she's not." And then when I was in the grocery store, I'd go to Walmart to pick up pens, pencils, whatever I needed to run errands. And like the little old ladies that would walk next to me would like clutch their purses a little closer, hurry down the aisle to get away from me. And that was really weird to me because that had never happened before. Granted, I always had the, you know, clean blonde, brown hair, the really natural looking makeup, and like I didn't look like a troublemaker apparently. And then suddenly when I had this really cool mohawk and I had my makeup done a little bit more ostentatiously, I was suddenly a troublemaker and you had to get away from me as fast as possible. And it was really weird to me because I don't think I've ever met a person who made me uncomfortable who looked like I did at the time. I remember I was going to my best friend Ryan's band shows where all of the punks get together and all the people with the weird hair and the piercings and the tattoos. They were some of the nicest people I've ever met. If you ever go, you hear, "Oh, these mosh pits are super violent, you know, they're all, you know, people are hitting each other." That's not really true. There's a people in a group that can mosh around, but they're not hitting the people who don't want to participate. And if they accidentally hit each other and they're not intending to, then it's, you know, they just, "Oh, are you okay? You're fine." If somebody falls over in one of those pits, like 5 hands reach down to pull you back up, and you're okay. I remember I fell down at one of these things and I had like 6 people pull me back up and I was perfectly fine. I might have had a bruise or two from falling, but like everybody was quick to get me up and make sure I was okay. That doesn't really happen everywhere else though. Like if you're in a grocery store, if you fall over, most people are just kind of like, well, we'll see if she gets back up. Maybe one person will stop and be like, "Are you okay?" But not very many people are like looking out for you. And I remember even in those crowds, I mean, you're still on guard because you're in a bunch of people who you don't know, but I didn't feel like I had to watch my back as closely because we were all here, we're all kind of a community that came together to enjoy music. But looking from the outside, everybody saw the crazy haircuts, the crazy makeup, the tattoos and the piercings that labeled us as bad people. And that's just not true. I remember that I felt a lot more judged when I was around people who were the clean cut, the people who, you know, looked like the good kids. I felt so much more harshly judged. I felt like I had to say certain things, I had to behave a certain way in order to be accepted by them. Versus when I was with these people who all looked different, they just said, "Cool." I could have differing opinions from them. And they just said, fine. If they really didn't like it, they just wouldn't talk to me and they would leave me alone. Versus feeling like they had to correct me. And that kind of comes into our topic of not judging a book by its cover. Because we label so many different people in the workforce, when we're in the grocery store, when we're just living our everyday lives based on the way that they look. And that's really not a good thing. And we're taught from the young age to be like, you know, don't judge people, don't, you know, but at the same time we're also pulling our kids a little closer when that biker walks through the aisle and you're like, "Oh, he's coming after my kids and he's gonna hurt me," and that you pull all your kids closer. Your kids notice that. Now I understand, you know, being a parent, being, you know, an older sibling or somebody who's taking care of somebody else, you want to make sure that you're taking care of them. And if somebody gives you that feeling, you're going to try to do what you can to take care of them. But maybe take a second to think, am I just judging them? Or is it that they're giving me a bad vibe? Because if you kind of look around what's going on, there are so many videos out there and so many groups with all of these big, tough biker guys. I saw one the other day that it was a biker who was afraid of dogs. And somebody brought him like a little tiny, like Chihuahua-sized dog, and he was terrified because he was scared of dogs. And they had to kind of talk him down and be like, it's okay, kind of getting him to like the dog. Does that sound like a very big, mean, tough guy who's going to hurt you? And then on the other side of that, there's a nonprofit called BACA, and it's Bikers Against Child Abuse. And what they do is they will go and kind of protect these children who have been abused, either physically, sexually, emotionally, whatever it is, while they're going through the court proceedings because they have to show up. They will help this child feel protected from whoever was their abuser. They'll make sure that they're okay. There's somebody taking care of them. Does that sound like a mean person who's going to hurt you? And there are so many stigmas against them that we cringe against even the idea of talking to them. One of my favorite coworkers today is a biker. He was like this big guy. They always described him as like this grouchy old man at the counter. He was the sweetest guy I remember there. He was always super nice. He said, if you ever need anything, you let me know and I'll take care of you. But everybody already had this label for him because he was a biker. That doesn't really say anything about his character other than he likes motorcycles. My haircut didn't say anything other than I wanted short hair. And if you asked me, I'd say, well, it's because it was tugging on my piercing and it was annoying and it hurt, so I got rid of the hair. It's gonna grow back, and it did. Like a year later, I had hair down to my chin already. And that was because I had to cut it to even it out. I wasn't dressing that way because I was getting into anything bad. I never did drugs. I drank alcohol when I was 21, and I will still occasionally enjoy a drink, but I wasn't getting wasted every weekend. I was still going to church on Sundays. I was still volunteering. I was working at a school with children. I was helping people all the time. I didn't change my personality. I changed my appearance. Yet that changed how so many people were looking at me. They looked at me and said, I must be a troublemaker. I must be getting into something bad. If I wore short shorts, because let's face it, it's Texas, and on my wedding day it was 113 degrees. It gets hot down here. I wore short shorts. I'm also very tall. Suddenly people were saying, oh, she must be promiscuous. She must be trying to get some guys to come after her. And it's like, no, it's hot, and I don't feel like wearing full-length jeans because it's hot, and I'm already sweating in shorts. I wasn't trying to do anything. I just happened to be tall and happened to be in shorts. And it was fighting against this that made me a little bit tougher and a little bit more proud to be who I was and to have gotten to know so many really great people. But it also kind of hurt because I was suddenly, people were afraid to let their kids near me. And if you know me, I love kids. I was so distracted this last Easter because me and my husband went to church, and he just looked at me, he's like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I can hear the coo of all the babies in the room, and that's where my attention is right now. Because I love kids. They're so curious and interesting. And I always will wave to them in grocery stores. If there's a kid in the, pew before me in church that is looking back at me, I will wave and smile and make all the dorky faces because I love playing with them. I love, expressing, their curiosity and letting them play with my weird keychains, or they want to touch my earrings. That's fine to me. But suddenly, because I had the punk haircut and I had the weird makeup and I was a little bit more ostentatious, people were more hesitant to let me near their kids. And people who didn't really know me that well, people who were, a little scared of what I looked like, or had never met me before meeting me for the first time, they would kind of take a step back and be like, okay, if they saw me waving at their kids, they'd kind of hurry out. And I wasn't doing anything differently than I was before I had my haircut change. That was literally the only thing that had changed, was my haircut. And yet suddenly, everybody looked at me differently. People were hurrying down the aisles, and I was scaring off the old ladies, and all the kids were still fine with me. They would, especially the ones that knew me, my little cousins, they'd come up and touch my hair, or they'd come and look to me, and they'd still run up to me and give me hugs, and I'd play with them. But all of the other parents and that didn't know me were terrified of me. Wasn't doing anything wrong. I've never hurt kids, and I never will. That's not who I am. But I got that label because I looked different. And a couple years later, I still have my piercing. I still wear it different ways. I still love it. I still play with my hair all the time. I might not have a mohawk anymore, but I have a piece of my hair back here that's dyed red. I have 2 tattoos. But if I hide everything, if I let my hair down and you can't see it, and I either don't wear makeup or wear a lot more neutral makeup, I get treated normally. If people start to see all this stuff or have looked on my Instagram and seen my red hair or my mohawk, they get mixed signals. They're like, I even had somebody who I worked with say, if you had had that red hair when you applied for this job, we would not have hired you. And this was somebody who I had set up so many documents for them. I had proved that I was a hard worker and I was a good worker. I had set up a charity event, which was one of their most successful ones. Yet, if I had had different hair, I would not have been hired. I was going to be judged for what I looked like, not the kind of work I did. Maybe that's why a lot of these people who look a little different are out doing drugs or getting in trouble. Maybe that's the only thing that they can do, because you won't hire them because they look different. Now, I'm not saying that they do, because I know plenty of them who've become nurses, who are amazing photographers, who are artists, who are in bands, who are doing all of these extraordinary things. But they've had to rise above all of the prejudice. They've had to push past all of people's opinions of them and prove themselves, because people had this idea that because they looked different, they were bad people. And this happens every day, whether it's because you look different because of your makeup or your hair or your piercings or your tattoos, if you have a different skin color, if you have a different sexual orientation, people are quick to judge you. And I've seen it happen before, where there's this really clean-cut looking person, they come up, they meet him, they're like, yeah, this person's great, I love them. And then they say that they're bi or gay or a lesbian or whatever, that has nothing to do with their personality. It just has to do with who they like being with or who their partner's going to be. And suddenly they kind of shut down. They take a step back and say, okay, well, it was great to meet you, and they just leave. We judge people too quickly based on things that are different from ourselves. And it happens so often, and it's part of the bullying problem. It's part of the whole racism problem. It's part of the whole equal rights problem. We're not fighting to be better than you, we're fighting to be equal to you. And we want to be treated the same. And once you get to know some of these people who look like troublemakers, they're some of the sweetest people you've ever met. If, once people saw that I had the mohawk and the whole weird makeup, and they'd come up to me and they'd actually take some time to get to know me, they'd say, oh, you're actually an amazing person. I love talking to you. You're really great. Like it's a shock. Like it's a surprise. Like, oh my gosh, you aren't like what you look like. And I'm like, well, what do I look like? I look like a person who maybe likes to wear green eyeshadow every now and then because it's a fun color. I'm a person who doesn't really like to fix their hair in the morning, so I cut it off. But because of that, I get judged like I'm a troublemaker, or like I don't care, or don't work hard. So I challenge you, the next time you see somebody who kind of puts you on edge, figure out why. Is it because they look different than you? Is it because of a predisposition to something, like maybe you saw that they had tattoos, or maybe you saw that their hair color is weird? Why don't you just ask him? I have no problem when people used to come up and say, how come you dyed your hair red? I usually just said, I don't know, I thought it'd be fun. I like red hair. It looks cool. I wasn't doing anything that would prevent me from doing it, so I did it. Why do you have that tattoo? Well, I have this one because I was in Florida during the Pulse shooting. I was like 5 minutes down the road, and my apartment with my other roommates didn't even know what was happening that morning, and I got home and found out that so many people who we worked with, who we cared about, weren't gonna come in anymore. And it still terrifies me because I have so many friends who go to these kinds of places because they want to be accepted. They want to have fun with a community that supports them. And they were gunned down. No, my family and friends weren't at this particular club, but they go to others. And it scared me. I was getting calls. I don't even go to these clubs, and I was getting calls making sure that I was okay. Because somebody decided that they had a right to decide whether we lived or died. I have this one, which is an orchid that I drew because it's my husband's favorite flower. Because unlike a lot of other cut flowers, you can't cut an orchid and keep it in water. You have to take care of it. You have to grow it. You have to keep an eye on it and make sure it's doing okay, the kind of same way that you do with your relationships. You take the time to take care of them. Because of that, though, people will judge me. So my challenge is, ask somebody. If you see somebody with blue hair, say, hey, that looks really cool. Or, what made you decide to dye it blue? Maybe they have a story. If you see a tattoo that doesn't make sense to you, go and ask them what it's about. Maybe what they decided to do. Maybe they just thought it was cool. Maybe it has a deeper meaning. So before you go and judge somebody, find out what their story is. You never know. That might be the person that you need to talk to, or that might inspire you to try a little harder, or pick you up on your day, or that might be your next best friend. Thanks for listening.